Good afternoon. This is Media Center, Ukraine, Odesa. Our first briefing is dedicated to the one of the most important topics related to the war, which is widely discussed in social media by experts, healthcare workers, and journalists. This is blood transfusion on the battlefield, as well as during evacuation and stabilization of patients. Our speaker is Daryna Smolnikova, member of the hospital's medical battalion, who is online with us today. She is a co-founder of the charity project Your Blood Can Fight. Good afternoon, Daryna. Good afternoon. Could you tell us why this important, why this topic is so widely discussed recently? I think that it has been widely discussed over the last month, and it is related with the long-awaited decree of the Cabinet of Ministers for the blood supply to the battlefield. Because before that decree, the blood that was sent to the front line, hospitals, stabilization points, was submitted only by call of some authorized persons. But at some point, the Ministry of Health decided to make this process automative, and then it was understood that the Ministry of Health has a different perspective on the issue. The Ministry of Health supports the idea supported by different countries, including Israel, etc., saying that the blood can be transfused not only by doctors, but also for medical battalions. And then the other side says that it should be limited only to doctors, and we have discussed it widely over the last months, and that was the real hybrid information and political war involving not only representatives of charitable foundations, ministries, NGOs, but also MPs, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, and also different units of the Ministry of Defense, which are related to the issues of the medical forces, but not the members of the relevant unit of the General Staff. And that was the whole political fight. And then it was finalized by the statement of Hanna Malar that the Ministry of Defense will allow the military doctors, medical healthcare workers to be involved in blood transfusion. Can you explain why blood transfusion is so important topic? Because I thought that during evacuation and stabilization, they use the special solution to supply enough water to the body. Why the blood is so widely discussed? The United States. Daryna, I'm sorry, but we have some interruption in the connection. I've only heard you mentioning the United States. Could you repeat? Sorry for these connection issues. The question, what should be transfused in a person bleeding, was discussed in the United States for the last 30, 40 years. But the information was analyzed back during the World War because the United States and, for example, Israel are more careful about their statistics and their analysis. And over the 30 years of the research, it was surprisingly found out that if a person has a lot of blood should be transfused, no other some solutions or substances. And when healthcare workers use such solutions as a physiological solution, then there are less chances for a person to survive. Unfortunately, Ukrainian medicine, especially military one, is far from the facts. And actually, of course, this philosophical solution is not that expensive as blood, because the package of blood is more than 1,000 hryvnias. Then you should add costs for transportation, for storage, and for warming it up. There were a lot of discussions about responsible people responsible for those costs, and administrative resources to control the quality of blood. And of course, it is easier just to ban blood transfusion. But we don't have only bad guys, but we also have a lot of unprofessional people, even among doctors, surgeons, and others who learned using the manuals of the 1970s, and they still believe that saline could save people. And now there is no alternative to blood in all NATO countries. So there are no alternatives or components. So you cannot substitute blood with this other solution. You cannot do anything without blood. Several years ago, I communicated with an injured serviceman who was stabilized and was brought from Shirokino to Mariupol, and he got saline. But of course, I'm not a professional, and that he was lucky that he survived, and I'm happy that he survived. Me too. How long blood could be stored? After it is provided from this center, I want to store it frozen. No, it is not stored frozen. The temperature of blood is to 6 degrees Celsius, so it should be stored cold, but not frozen. It could be stored for up to 35 days, since it was prepared, since it was taken from another person, and it depends on the conservants which are used. Usually it's like up to 35 days. And by this is, it seems that this is not enough, but you can, it's every week the new blood is supplied to stabilization points. That's why that is enough, the dice. It would be great if it was not that needed, but this is the situation. And this means that people should donate blood all the time at different points. So this blood is always in demand, and then it should be supplied to stabilization points and hospitals at the front line. Yes, but people should always donate blood, not only during the war, but during peaceful times, because the culture of donating blood is not that well developed in Ukraine. So we don't have enough donors in our country, even during peaceful times. And there's still certain problems related to administration, to blood management. And sometimes there is lack of blood at some points, and some other points are overloaded with blood. And the blood transfusion system in Ukraine is very young. And we have just started developing the system following Ukrainian standards. We still need some time, but every year we can see the increased number of active donors, and during the war, of course, we need more such donors, especially universal donors, the blood 0- that is actively used during evacuation when we cannot check the blood type of an injured person, and we need to act quickly, not to waste our time. That's why we use 0- blood, and there is a lack of the donors with such donors. So this is the universal blood type that can be transfused to all people. I have one more question. During the discussion of who can transfuse blood, the procedure was discussed. Is it really difficult to learn this procedure? is it a difficult manipulation for a combat medic? For example, during evacuation, which usually is in very difficult conditions. When we speak about evacuation stages, using of blood in ambulances, M113, and we have some brigades that also transport blood in fridges. But technically, this is the same procedure as having the saline package. And of course, you should be more careful with this blood package. But we have some special systems. We use plastic systems for the blood not to be spoiled and for the package not to be damaged, not to lose this donor blood. So the technique is the same. You need to use intravenous catheter and just connect the blood package. So technically, it is very easy. Now, when we speak about European time training, when it includes not only the previously prepared blood, but also the transfusion of the fresh blood from other servicemen or servicewomen, this procedure is more difficult because the needles are bigger. It is very difficult to put them in the same vein. For example, I'm not sure that I will be able to do this for myself because I have small veins, and it is easier to work with big servicemen, and also we should control clotting of blood, but still it is not that difficult. And also the identifying the blood type, it is not that difficult if we work at stabilization point. If you want to define the blood type, we just need to take 4 drops of blood from finger and put it on a paper, and I think that Ukrainian soldiers can do this easily by themselves. And the last question. What you felt personally after that bloody, literally, discussion resulted in the permission to combat medics to transfuse blood, providing possibility to save lives of people they evacuate? If you remember, then that day that was a video with combat medic responding to that news. That was our training for combat medic, where we were certifying combat medics to the instructors of tactical medicine. That was our common victory because we gave millions of interviews, but at some point we just thought that we would fail, that it will take several years for us to change that decree, and that we felt some euphoria. Just a year ago, that was a very difficult question of blood transfusion, even at some civil hospitals, but we, with the white public, were able to achieve that result, and that was incredible. And we just, that there were Soviet superstitions, and we coped with that. We were supported by NGOs, by charitable foundations, by the Ministry of Health, the Central of Blood Transfusion, and everyone won. And then I felt that we should continue solving other tactical medicine problem, that even in the United States, it took them 30 years to solve the issue. And well, it took them even 20 years before they started transfusing blood. If we start with the beginning of the war, it's 9 years, and it's for the full-scale invasion that was a year and a half, so this is a significant victory for us. Thank you. And I have a question from a journalist watching us online. How can be survival chances increased if blood is transfused and not saline? Statistically, it is very difficult to calculate when it comes to really quality statistical surveys. So we need to compare the injured soldiers with the saline and the blood transfusion, and then to calculate how many of them survived in 2 and 30 days. Unfortunately, we don't have such opportunity for experience, and we have the great data that we could analyze retrospectively, but unfortunately, we do not collect and do not systematize those data. When it comes to European and American data, then I think that the chances increased in 1.5, 2 times when it comes about mass bleeding. But when it comes to survival, when it comes about preventive cases, and we understand that when we stop bleeding, this is not everything. That we need to renew like blood because a person can die because of the consequences of bleeding. And this is not the only problem, because there is the great number of people who were likely to survive even without blood transfused to its components, but then they have some problems with the kidneys, and so there will be dialysis, and some other face the problems with central nervous system, because when people lose blood, they lose oxygen, and of course the brain could be damaged, and they can have headaches and some mental disability. So we do not speak only about survival, but we can speak about the great number of accompanying problems. Thank you very much for sharing all these details. Thank you for being with us today, and I'm really glad that you and other combat medics won in this discussion, in this bloody discussion. Thank you. That was Daryna Smolnikova from the Hospitalers battalion and the co-founder of the charity project Your Blood Can Find. Our next briefing will be at 9 p.m. We will have the English military expert with us, Glenn Glant, and we will discuss the counter-offenses, and he will also analyze what happening in the combat zone. Now, stay tuned.